All right, welcome back to the channel, guys. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications so you know when I post a new video, but more importantly, when I go live, if you like when I do that. And if you're new or you've been a returning subscriber, like the video and let's get into it. So what is this video about? We're talking about tiering up from gold to platinum and what you should know. This is a concern that is a very common one. There's a lot of people in Discord who are heeding good warnings about moving up to platinum, but I'm going to try and break down as best as you can what you can expect for it. So, is this you? Are you about to master that one color that's going to put you into platinum? Are you sweating over it? Or have you just found yourself freshly tiered up into platinum and you're not sure what to do next? If that's you, then this video is for you. I'll try and help you make the transition as smooth as possible by telling you what you should expect and how you can swim with the sharks without getting eaten alive, so to speak. So, what are the main changes that happen when you go from gold to platinum? Let's start on a positive note. So, the rewards for both hitting progression points and placing at the top increase dramatically. Maybe not that dramatically, but it's definitely an upgrade for sure from gold to platinum. You don't have to delay mastering cards to tier up anymore, which is a huge deal. Now you get to play with all the cards you've been waiting on because you've been avoiding tiering up. So now you get to build and test all the cards and decks that you want. And, you know, just the whole world opens up for you as far as this game goes. The learning curve to get to the top of platinum is a little bit over exaggerated in my opinion. It's not as scary as it's made out to be. Sure, you'll probably lose more, but not as much as you think. And here's something that's very relevant. PvE events don't get more difficult if you tier up. You get better rewards for the same amount of difficulty. So bronze players and platinum players play the same PvE events. That's all I'm trying to say. But yeah, let's talk about the downsides then. The percentage of strong decks that you will run into in PvP increases dramatically because you basically run the gamut of newly tiered up platinum players and 10-year plus vets. Or I don't know if it's been about 10 years that this game has been around. So yeah, there are people who have been playing from the beginning and their collection shows it. The amount of different cards that you see in decks shrinks because the players you've been seeing tend to use a lot of the same meta cards. So you're going to see the same cards and decks pop up, especially in quick battle where everybody's just trying to score and scoop rewards. Your chance of losing increases by a lot because the competition is much more advanced. And there's a giant ranking bottleneck at the top due to the amount of skilled players, which, you know, is a problem in the community. I don't know how the devs feel about it really, but I do feel that ranking needs an overhaul. But until then, we're going to be dealing with this bottleneck. But, you know, beyond that, the game is more or less the same. If you're placing at the top of gold, and I hope you were if you were watching this because you found my YouTube channel and therefore likely found the rest of the community through it and got great advice in those channels. And so then a lot of the same strategies should translate to the platinum level. You'll probably have to tweak a few strategies to dominate with your current collection, but you'll likely start doing fine in no time. But if you're not in that camp, then you likely just tiered up because you weren't actually trying to and let it happen naturally. Or maybe as the worst case, you purposely tiered up as quickly as possible, not knowing that the difficulty of PvE battles was going to jump up dramatically. If that describes you, then man, I truly feel your pain. The game doesn't really give you an idea of what's in store for you at this level. But fortunately, you can get a lot of advice about how to navigate this tier from the community, including from me. I'm constantly in a lot of the Discords giving advice. So if you're already familiar with me through that community, well, thanks for watching this anyway. But if you're not, I would recommend joining one of the Discords if you want to get better at this game. I feel like it's the best place to go for real-time help. Reddit's okay. The forums we don't really talk about here. but I guess you can find some useful info there from people who are active. I honestly don't know who's really in there that often these days, but it used to be the only place to go. And I think Discord is far superior for real time help these days. Let's talk about it. How to build for the meta. Now that you are in platinum, your expectations might change because if you're used to winning a lot in gold and you want to keep that same percentage of wins to losses, then we got to think about a few things here. Since standard format takes up the majority of the events at any given time, building for standard will be the most important thing to do. I'm going to center the advice I give you around standard because legacy is just too big of a thing and it will always be changing as cards rotate into legacy anyway. So I think standard is a lot more relevant to give you advice for right now. And yeah, since sets rotate out of standard after 3 years, it'll be worth understanding what your biggest threats will be and how to deal with them. Each card you put into your deck matters a lot more now. At this point, you should start to realize that every card slot has to be maximized to the utmost degree. The best cards in the game are the ones that can do multiple powerful things or do one important thing extremely well. So let's talk about a card that is a really good example of that. Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. It is probably my favorite creature in standard right now because, it's a creature that does 3 powerful things. It deals damage to your opponent every time it attacks or enters the board, and the amount of damage increases every trigger, and it fetches a card to give it full mana after your turn. A less powerful but still relevant effect is that it exiles your library, which combos with certain other cards and planeswalkers to increase their power. And this is a top tier card that is super popular because of the utility of those effects. Another card that is incredibly powerful and popular is Galta Stampede Tyrant. And if you participated in the quest rewards last week, then you got this card for free if you didn't have it already. So that is pretty awesome. But being able to convert that many gems on ETB almost always guarantees you that you'll fill the next couple of cards in your hand with mana, or at least the next one. So this will make it so much easier to utilize the rest of your deck and make it easier to stay ahead of your opponent. So you've probably run into Galta Grist decks, so you might be familiar with this already. Another card that is super powerful and super popular is Mystical Teachings. It's one of the best spells in the game. It lets you choose one of the next 2 spells in your library and gives it full mana. So this really lets you shape your turn and what you need it to be at the moment. You can grab a much more expensive spell that will likely be really useful in that moment, such as Tempt with Discovery, a spell that converts so many gems to green that will help you get a lot of cards into your hand in play. Not only that, but it'll let you choose one of the next 4 cards in your library twice and gives them half their mana. So these cards are at the top of the meta among others, but the reason these cards are there is because they help you set the tempo of the game and help you stay ahead of your opponent in terms of setting your board state up. When you have these cards in your deck, it's like you're playing 3 cards at once, right? So that's why the more of these cards you have in your deck, the better you're likely to do depending how useful those cards are. Most of the time, you want to play cards that have an immediate impact when you play them. The exception to this is when you're building a combo deck and the card serves to make that engine run. Otherwise, for the most part, you'll want to play cards that serve you either on the turn you're on or at least on your next turn. Cards that are only in your deck to make you win easier are important, but less so if your objective is just to keep from losing. The best win cons, in my opinion, are the ones that you can build for easily, or they fit naturally with the other cards in your deck. Win cons that aren't as great to me are the ones that take too much setup to be reliable, or they need to be triggered too often to be consistent. Big part about being successful in Platinum is the type of defense you set up, because defense becomes so much more important in Platinum. In lower tiers, you can get away with packing 1 or 2 forms of removal. The speed that other decks set up, because they're usually playing a lot of multifunctional cards, makes it so that you need to have constant removal on hand. Cards that have built-in recurring destruction, such as Rakdos the Defiler or Ulamog, or is it Ulamog the Defiler? And Rakdos Patron of Chaos. Yeah, that's right. Or mass destruction spells such as Requisition Raid, Chaos Warp. Those are ones you're going to want to target because they sit at the top of the list as far as useful removal goes. And speaking of lists, here's a list of what I feel are a good representation of the most effective removal cards for every color in today's standard. So white, Requisition Raid, Inevitable Defeat, and Localized Destruction. All three of these cards remove multiple things at the same time. As you can see, they're mythic and masterpiece level because they are that good. Red, we got Chaos Warp, Molten Collapse, Rakdos Patron of Chaos, and the Nicol Bolas Vanguards. The reason that Chaos Warp is good is because you can choose when you play it to destroy either creatures or supports, and you get to steal a card from their deck. So it does a lot of great things for you there. It's one of the best removal cards probably in the whole game. We got Molten Collapse, which only destroys one card at a time, but it's good because it can destroy multiple types of cards. You don't want a lot of cards that can only destroy one type of card in your deck, unless it can destroy multiple versions of that card at a time. That's a good rule of thumb to go by. Rakdos Patron of Chaos is just recurring destruction. It makes it really hard to keep things on your opponent's side in play. So you can see this is a really good card, especially playing it early, because it'll be really difficult for your opponent to gain any sort of momentum. Same thing with Nicol Bolas Planeswalker. It's a little bit more dependent on your opponent's side of the board. So it's not a card I use a lot myself because the +2 is dependent on your opponent having supports in play. The -4 is great. It lets you steal a creature. So that's another way of removing a card from your opponent, is just putting it on your side away from them. Green doesn't have as many global types of board wipes, but it has a few, like the Great Aurora, which is an Origins mythic, so hopefully a lot of you already have that. It's not one I use a lot because I don't love destroying everything on my side either, but it's a good one to play with like Vanguards because it's not affected by it. Convert to Slime can remove multiple types of cards at the same time, so that makes it very nice. We got Urgent Necropsy. It is dependent on other cards, but the effect is pretty powerful. And if you don't have the condition to collect 2 evidence, it's untargeted removal of a creature, which, is almost always relevant anyway. Chalk Outline can destroy opposing cards at random, so it's untargeted removal, and it has that upside of creating a bunch of detective tokens. So it's multifunctional there. You can either play it as removal, or you can play it as a way to bring creatures into play. And then Crawl Whipcracker is a very cheap card that's untargeted removal, and it can destroy multiple types of cards. I don't think it destroys Vanguards, it's the only thing. But it's a 6 mana uncommon, which is why it's so popular. Easy one for Grist to bring into play as well. Black, you would think, would have a lot more global removal, like mass destruction. But it actually has a little bit of different flavor to a lot of these cards. Tribute to Hunger, it is just a single removal card, but the upside of gaining 12 life and 5 mana per creature you control makes it a great combo piece, and it will auto cast, so it's a popular card in looping decks for that reason. Undercity Plague is continuous removal. It's almost like Rakdos in a support. Nettlevine Blight is also that way, but Nettlevine Blight is limited to land cards and creatures, but it's still a really good card. 0 Point Ballad destroys all opposing creatures. You do lose life from doing that, but it also steals a card from them, so it is a very good card. It's one I use a lot. And then Blasphemous Edict is better when you have a deck that is putting a lot of things into your graveyard, but it is a really strong card once you have your graveyard filled because it's not only is it destroying all opposing creatures, but it's also exiling their graveyard. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for a Grist, for example, to make its way back in terms of board state. Blue. Blue doesn't have a lot of mass removal, but it does have some really key cards that are good for using in your platinum decks. Demon Inferior, really good spell, very cheap, 12 mana, and it has flash, and it will send your opponent's creatures to the top of their library. So not only does it wipe their side, but it's going to usually take them some time to get their creatures back into play because they usually are only drawing one card at a time. Stolen Goods is really strong. It does require your opponent to have supports on the board, but not only is it stealing their supports and putting them into play, but it's sending them and all their non-token cards back to their hand. There's no room, they get destroyed. Amphibian Downpour is recurring removal. When a creature is played by your opponent, then it just immediately gets turned into a frog. They do get to use their Enter the Battlefield effect, unfortunately, but it's a very strong card. Ambiguity is kind of a tricky, weird way to remove things, but once it gets going, it basically shuts your opponent out as well as drains your opponent creatures as time goes on. So if it gets a foothold, you pretty much win the game because of that card. It's really devastating and the bane of many existence. Terratide should not be here because it's a black card. For some reason, I'm thinking it was blue. Anyway, but it's a decent card, and I'll talk about it anyway. All opposing creatures get -X. X is the number of cards in your graveyard. So just fill your grave and then basically debuff your opponent's creatures into oblivion, which is actually a good way to get around shield counter. So this should actually probably be in black, but oh well, you get the idea. And then there are some colorless options. Olamog is basically like Rakdos, but it exiles and it triggers on ETB as well. It is a PM2 mythic, so not a lot of people have it, but it's an amazing card, and the longer you're in platinum, probably the more you'll start to see it as people's PM2 collections grow. Coalition Victory is a paid PM2 masterpiece, so you're not going to see it that often at all, at least for the time being. But if you hit that spree 3, exiling all opposing creatures, and even the spree 1, your opponent discarding 3 cards, is really devastating and can really help you if you build around it. Spree 5 is also great, the victory banner token where the last 5 cards in your hand gain full mana at the beginning of your next turn. It's a great card. There's a reason it costs so much to acquire. Demolition Field, recurring support removal, can make it really hard for your opponent to gain the upper hand with supports. Desert, also recurring removal of supports and creature damage. Devourer of Destiny is kind of a weird one. It is removal with a little bit of upside. An opposing support is exiled at random, and if they don't have supports to exile, then it will exile opposing creature. So multiple types of removal there. So you can see what types of cards I'm talking about here in terms of defense that are very useful. So I think if you have copies of these cards, they're going to really help you as you go. So yeah, some of these colors are going to overlap with others because they're multicolored cards, but I want to make sure that this list works for monocolor walkers. So there's alternate strategies for defense. Destroying creatures is far from the only form of defense, as I showed. In fact, it usually isn't even the best option. A lot of times, destroying cards leave them open to be brought back from the graveyard for little to no cost. Thank you, Grist. Sometimes cards even benefit from being destroyed, so you end up avoiding targeting them. You could exile cards, and that's better a lot of the time because there are far less ways to bring cards out from the exile into play than from the graveyard. And also, most cards don't have effects that trigger from being exiled, so it tends to be safer. And there are some objectives that limit the amount of times you can destroy a creature, so it's usually a better option overall. Stealing cards from your opponent is a very effective way to remove them for obvious reasons. It prevents your opponent from using them and lets you use them instead. It tends to be a targeted effect, but there are cards like Kidnap that let you temporarily steal creatures from your opponent. Maybe that should have been in my blue list. Villainous Wealth can be a devastating card, not only because it's stealing cards from your opponent, but it's basically giving you 2 extra fee cards in your turn, so it can highly accelerate the pace in your favor. It's not really removal, but it is stealing cards. Disabling cards, especially when it's a permanent effect, can be really effective. Not only does it stop the card from being used when it's already in play, but there are cards that immediately disable cards even before they have a chance to trigger their effect on ETB, such as Assimilation Aegis. And there was a time where permanent disable was the best way to deal with creatures in Standard. When Sleep with the Fishes was in Standard, it was a card that was used all the time. Bouncing a card to their library can be an effective strategy because it makes it so that they can't easily put it back into play a lot of the time. Bouncing to hand is, a valid strategy as well, but it sometimes will make it pretty easy to put back into play. So I personally prefer bouncing to library if I'm going to do this. Discard can be a very effective strategy, especially in the current meta, because it can prevent your opponent from using the cards before they have any chance to affect you. If you're discarding the card that Dragonhawk puts into full mana at the end of their turn, then you're basically neutralizing a lot of what makes Dragonhawk great. Mana Drain, to a lesser effect, can help you achieve the same results, but I think Mana Drain is a good secondary effect to a card rather than when it's the only effect a card has. A balance of 2 or 3 of these different options in the deck should be enough to keep you safe in most battles. I would aim for a balance of 2 or 3 of these different options in a deck, and it should be enough to keep you safe in most battles. Do your research. So, one of the best ways to improve your game is to look at other winning decks as examples. You can do that on Discord when people post them, but there are other ways of doing that. You can look at what other players are using. You can spy on any deck if you fill their grave or exile. Easiest way to do this is by using Mind Skinner and Spacetime Anomaly, because those destroy your opponent's library in a massive way. I recommend doing this when you come across a particularly nasty deck. Then you just click on their side of the screen where, you know how you can look at your own graveyard or exile? Well, you can do that to your opponent as well. You just click on their side of the screen where you would do it for yourself. You can also look at the battle log, but you may not be able to find all 10 cards in their deck there. The advantage to that, though, is that you can look at it after the battle ends. So if you get wiped off the planet by a loop deck, for example, they probably played a lot of their cards, so you can just go spy on it there. I like to have a little notebook that I keep on hand when I'm playing at home, where sometimes I'll jot down all the cards in a deck that I think is really good, or I just want to copy it or try it out. This is a pretty good way of finding out what's popular in the meta. All you need to do is notice which cards show up in your list a lot. Chances are they're good cards. I created a video that will help you create a strong general purpose deck that will help you win more games overall, and will serve as a solid foundation for deck building that you can learn from. Should you go VIP? I'll try and make a little bit of a case for it. VIP gains you a pretty good amount of resources on top of what I feel is a generous amount of free resources if you play all the events you can. If you're diligent and patient, you can take advantage of the wide array of things that you can spend those pinks and yellows on. If you're okay with using a lot of free time grinding for resources daily, you can still keep up with gaining the essential cards provided that you are smart about where you spend them. My rule with crystals is to always prioritize the sure bets, things that you know for sure you'll gain from using crystals. Things like planeswalkers, guaranteed cards, deck slots. Stop spending so much on lottery pools. I only spend crystals on premium packs at the very beginning of the set release. Why is that? because I'm most likely to get new cards there. I usually spend enough crystals to buy up to 5 premium packs on day 1 of a set release. After that, the likelihood of getting new cards drops enough that it's not really worth it anymore to me. There's actually a good amount of players that never spend crystals on packs. They only use them on planeswalkers and maybe on deck slots, and only on the yearly holiday sale. That has a 20% discount on top of the already reduced cost of planeswalkers from being a VIP. Basically, if you want to stay on top of card acquisition, especially with the high rarity cards set after set, and you don't have time to grind for the resources daily and have a job that pays you enough that a monthly subscription doesn't make you sweat, then I'd recommend it. Also, if you believe that the game gives you enough satisfaction that you feel compelled to support it, that's another good reason. It's really up to you. You know, if you have more time than money, then this game is pretty good for free-to-play players. If you have more money than time, but really enjoy the game, then I would recommend trying out VIP for a month and decide from there if it's something that you want to keep doing. In conclusion, if you followed the advice on this channel and joined a Discord community, asked a lot of questions and got a lot of good feedback on your decks, then you're likely going to be doing better than you expect. Yeah, it's going to feel like an insurmountable obstacle at first, but I do believe it's kind of by design. I think that the jump in difficulty from gold to platinum is meant to feel huge, so that I'll encourage you to buy resources so that you can hold your own. You know, buying resources with cash, I mean. And yeah, I do think that this game is pretty generous when it comes to gaining resources. There was a time where it felt like they were really slashing daily rewards, but I feel like for the most part, they've really made up for it and then some. A few years ago, I made this video on resource acquisition and management, but it's about 3 years old at this point, and the game has changed enough that a lot of the info is unfortunately outdated. But, you know, there's still a lot of relevant info in there, and maybe I'll do an updated version of that. Yeah, I want you to succeed because the more good players there are, the more likely they are to stay with it and keep the game going. Also, the more robust the player base is, the more people there will be who like trying new cards and discovering new combos and fun stuff to share with the community, like myself. It just makes for a healthier and more enjoyable community when there are a lot more players enjoying the game because they're winning on a higher level, right? So I tried to put in as much general advice as I could in this video, but you know, there's going to be so much more I'm sure I didn't cover. So if you're one of the players I'm talking to with this video concept, let me know if there are any things that I didn't talk about, you know, on the subject of tiering up that you want to know. Also, if you're a veteran player who's been in Platinum for a while and just want to chime in with more advice, go ahead and leave it in the comments. If there's enough feedback, I'll absolutely make a second part to this video and try and help people out even more. So yeah, like I said, if you're new to the channel, here are some videos that I referenced in this one that'll also help you get ready for tiering up to Platinum. Again, if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe, and check out some of these other ones that I have listed here.